Here we are, day number 1. About ready to cast. Have the workstation all set up. You can see one 4x8 melamine covered panel laying here, taped off roughly to the dimension of the first cast, which will be roughly 68 inches long by 4 feet wide. About ready to be treated with release agent. The top side of the compressed mold is here, about to be treated with release agent as well. So in the meantime, floors are protected for any drips, shoot some fall. Workstation is set up with the various different kind of polymers that we're going to be using, and then we got the carbon fiber roll here ready to go as well. Start from the middle, applying it. These are taped off to kind of mark the approximate space that I will be working with. Start from the inside and then work your way out. You can lay one layer if you want. Make it a heavy one if that is the case, or you can put 2 layers down. The second layer, due to friction and surface tension, will be a little bit more difficult to get in without bubbles. So it really depends on what you feel. I, in my experience, have been that 1 layer heavy is enough, especially when you are treating areas that are naturally a release agent like melamine, plastic. It's really not necessary to use 2 of them, but you can. Certainly your choice, whatever you feel. Then it is time to cut the carbon fiber. How you do that is really your business. There are 2 different true and tried techniques. This one never breaks. This one can run out of batteries. This one can pull the fabric, but so can this if you don't know how to cut really well. So whatever you prefer. I'll do the first cut here. I'll show it with the scissors. We'll leave this one for the next cut. So the plate is going to be 68 inches. I'm going to overlap by 1 inch and call it 69. You can continuously move the measuring tape, being very careful not to disturb it, the fibers that is. It's very easy to pull. Or you can simply follow the strains in the cloth so that you always get a straight cut. That's really, again, how you prefer. I use both. I follow the tracer in here, and then I also kind of eyeball and can see. Here's my 69. Again, this is really however you prefer it. Long stroke, short strokes, really how you prefer it. Again, just try not to disturb the fabric. There is a Kevlar tracer on the outside to hold it all in place. You might need to cut that a couple of times for it to open up. Here you have 1 layer. Then what I prefer to do is simply roll it up in a little sausage. That was the first layer with one of these. Same thing as before. Find your 69 inches. Nice and easy. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I'm just demonstrating this. I actually prefer the scissors. It just seems to work better. This thing is okay if it's smaller pieces, but bigger pieces can be somewhat of a challenge in order for you not to pull the fiber. See what I'm saying? And we're done. Repeat that as many layers. 5 rolls. I decided to change the design a bit. Overbuilding is okay and great, but this is way too much. 3 layers on the inside and 3 layers on the outside. So it is now 3 on the outside, 2 on the inside, and you can still stand an elephant on it. So anyway, time to cast. Then we got the 1/2 inch foam. It's cut to 69 inches as well, which will then be laid after the first 3 layers on top of the casting table. Now we start mixing it. Then it's time to mix the resin. How you do that is, well, there are probably 1,000 different ways. As far as calculation of it, one thing you can do is you can weigh all the carbon that goes on there, and then you can that will be 2/3 of the overall weight. So if the carbon weighs 50 gram, you put 25 gram of resin in it, so it's 1/3 resin, 2/3 by weight of carbon fiber. It's very difficult to overhaul or observe that rather if you are in a well, garage gangster attitude like I am here. That's where vacuum bagging, resin infusing comes in extremely handy for you because you can control it, and it is obviously vacuum bagged. So, but anyway, we're going to get close. I would imagine we're going to come in about 40% instead of 33. So, not too bad. But think of it as a layered cake. If you put too much frosting in between the layers, then things slip and slide, and the frosting itself adds nothing structurally to the matrix. So anyway, we'll start by mixing a bunch here on the scale. Whatever epoxy that you use is, of course, also okay. Totally up to you and what you feel like. This particular epoxy here is 1 to 2, so 2 parts of this, which is part A, and 1 part of the curing agent, part B. So we'll put in 600 grams to start with. We'll see how that works for us. Probably need more, but we'll start with 600 grams of part A. If your curing agents here and epoxy have been in the garage for a while, it would be very beneficial if your garage is cold to preheat it first. If you can get it to 70 degrees, that'll be fantastic. If you can't, as close to that as you can. What you want to make sure of is there's no crystallization in especially the part A. Part B is a little bit more resilient, but you don't want any of that. So now we need 300 grams of the part B, the curing agent here. That would suffice with 1 to 2. $899 is close enough for comfort here. Then it's a matter of, again, mixing, stirring, however you want to do that. This particular polymer is good for, I'm going to say a couple of hours of working time. In here it's 60 degrees. The table is heated to about 70, not a lot of heat. So I suspect I have a couple of hours working time, and then it'll set overnight. That varies obviously depending on what polymer that you are using. Some cures faster than other. Generally, the more you whip it, the faster you whip the matrix here, the more air bubbles do you stir in here, which is not really what you want. If you were vacuum bagging it, it'll just suck it all out, migrate the air out. But we're not. So there's a couple things we do. Again, we're not building a structural member like a spar for a wing of an aircraft. So, you know, I'm not saying there are not better ways of doing this, but what I am trying to say is try not to lift the pencil or whatever stir stick, call it whatever you want, out of the resin so it completely goes out, but make sure that you get down to the bottom and dig all of the non-mixed polymer up to the surface, and make sure you get it mixed methodically, nice and slowly. Many polymers, you can see that as you do get it mixed, it clears up from being a cloudy mix or a matrix. It clears up. Inevitably, you will steer bubbles in it. I have a vacuum chamber at my house. Obviously, I'm not at my house, but I have. And could we use that? Sure. But again, I want to simplify this, and I want to show how it can be done without worry too much. You observe a few rules, and you'll be fine. But the outer layer, what you don't want to do is try to avoid air bubbles that are trapped in here in the first layer, because it just looks terrible if you got a bunch of bubbles on the outer layer. And so what we'll do is we'll use a heat gun to remove that here in a second. But so we'll remember this number, and then we'll see on cast number 2 and 3 how 600 and 300 will work. But I suspect it'll probably need a little more, but we'll certainly take a look at it. So anyway, we'll stir this some more, and then we'll get back when we get ready to apply it. Time to apply the first layer. Dry off the stir stick so it's ready for next time. You always put down resin first, then fiber, then resin, and then you continue. The first layer will be kind of like trying to put down honey, really. It's going to be thick. Try to find a rhythm that works for you. You can see where it is putting down, but it's due to the cold temperature here, it is well, a wee bit thicker than I really would have liked to. Of course, if you see a hair, the drawback from using cheap Chinese bristles, you get a hair, scoop it off, pay attention to that. Hairs look terrible from the brush, especially on the outside when you're trying to make something look really pretty. Just watch over it, you can't miss it. So we'll see how long 900 grams will last here. Some people prefer to use a scraper, a very soft, like a rubberish scraper. That's fine too. Again, whatever you like is what you need to use. Again, trying to observe the 1 to 3 rule. Once you wet it all through, then don't be afraid to move the stuff. Unlike the release agent that quickly dries into a micro thin film, this is kind of like molasses. So feel free to, I don't want to say put some mustard in it because you want to be careful. Take out any impurities that you see. But you're trying to avoid to plaster a bunch of frosting, dare I say, on this. There will be bubbles, that's okay. Another thing that you don't want to do, you learn this really quick when you learn work with epoxy and composites. You don't go to the edge of the table yet. Leave that open. Because when you do, and you start leaning up against it, you will never be able to use those pants again. So leave that open. And that will be the last thing that you do when you're done reaching in on the table. See how I'm scraping off a little bit. And then you work from the inside to the outside. You don't want to put too little in it, especially on the first layer. The first layer will saturate up through the cloth. I'm going to say probably about a layer and a half. Make sure you stretch because this is kind of a bending over thing. So again, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Try to distribute it, the resin. And like I said, it's good that if you look at your watch, see what time you started, give yourself a couple of hours. If you can do it in one, that's wonderful. You will drip everywhere. So it's just the nature of the beast. One thing we didn't really talk, oh, there's another hair. One thing we didn't talk about is what kind of epoxy to use. Unlike polyesters, vinyl esters that has, or you can, built-in UV protection, these you really can't. It's a plastic, it's different, and so whatever you do, you will have to give it a, either paint it, well, change the color, and see, now I'm done, so I can go all the way out to the edge. Now be careful not to plaster too much out over the edge. You want to again make sure it's saturated, but if you just start rolling it off the side, it'll just drip down on your shoes or on the floor. So we're talking about painting afterwards. Whatever you do with epoxies, it has to be protected from ultraviolet light. The sun will, well, break down just about anything if you let it, that are of a non-metallic alloy nature, especially composite. This will not be painted, solid at least. I will, in the end, add a layer of automotive, probably 2 layers of automotive paint. It'll be a clear coat, not paint, sorry. And for that matter, I think carbon is pretty. It is also a heat source, so it'll be hot in that camper. But you can paint whatever you want. You can make it however you want it to look. Okay, looks like we're halfway done over here. We'll come over to the other side. Pick up where we left from the other side. Again, feel free, feel comfortable. Don't be afraid to squeegee the resin out, especially when you are in the colder periods. I prefer working this at 90 degrees. However, there's a winter storm outside, and Colorado right now is a tumultuous state to be in due to that. So I will take what I can. Back talking about epoxies. There are so many different ones. Polymer products, polymer composites from Ontario, California is what I have been using for the last probably 20 years, 20 something years. It's a wonderful company. They make really, really good polymers. They've always treated me really well. Their prices are affordable, and their epoxies holds up really well. I have used their high temperature epoxies for items that needed a post-heat cure. This particular system, as prescribed in the link, is called Max 1618. It is a very free-flowing, extremely clear epoxy that I have used for a very long time. The epoxy does not require a post-heat cure. It loves hanging around 90 degrees, but as long as you're at 70 degrees or more, you're really okay. It just takes a little bit longer to set. Whatever you use is really up to you. Maybe you have another alchemist that you have worked with in the past whose product you really, really like. So it's really up to you. Some it's 1 to 3 mixture, some is 1 to 4, some is like this one, 1 to 2, 1 part B, 2 part A, it just really just depends on the system that you're using. Cost is obviously a factor, and some are more expensive than others. So whatever you would like. This method where it is being used as a post-heat cure not required, meaning that you just lay it down and it will cure at room temperature, will never be as strong as epoxies that you bake. It's just a fact of, well, chemistry. It just won't. It's impossible to make polymers of plastic cure epoxy as strong as when you bake it. However, you can't really bake a 4 by 8 foot sheet. And as you guys that have followed my videos and threads and different forums and how to do this and that with epoxy, you remember that I try to make things simple because they obviously can be intimidating. So I try to simplify things, try to explain it, use material that is a simple matter. You don't have to add heat to it. And this is no different. The professional panels, maybe, whatever they want to use. But I assure you, with the strength that we're building up with this, it'll be just fine for what we're trying to use. You'll be able to put a rooftop tent on top of this thing and it'll be just fine. Almost done. Another thing is, you can kind of feel when you are brushing over, you try to catch the sheen of the epoxy when you brush it. And if you can't catch the sheen where you have been and where it's been applied, you can feel it. If you are brushing over where there is epoxy, it'll glide right on through due to the lubricity of the epoxy. If it has not, the pencil, or excuse me, pencil, I'm a foreigner, sorry, the brush will drag. So here we go, we're done with the first layer. First layer of carbon fiber. It is extremely difficult to make and lay those down in a beautiful manner. So what I do is I prep it like this, and now what we're going to do is treat this with a little bit of a heat, with a heat gun. Now to get rid of all the bubbles. Don't be afraid to get in there. You don't want to heat it up too much, and it's really only needed on the first layer. But if you get in there methodically, you will be able to just work all the bubbles out. What you're doing is you're breaking the surface tension, which will cause the bubbles which are already at the top. But when you break the tension either chemically with a spray of acetone or a heat gun, then you allow the bubbles to escape, and you get almost like a mirror finish. Is it necessary? It's up to you. It's an extra step that doesn't really cost you anything except for time. You can't really see it, but from where I'm standing looking at the lights here, I can see the bubbles disappearing. Just work your way around it. You will not get all of them out, but you will get most of them out that you otherwise would have trapped on the outer layer. So, you know, your layup will look better. Again, work your way halfway in there, or longer if you can reach. Just be careful not to drag your shirt. And you will pop them all out. If you don't have a heat gun, don't want to mess with a heat gun, you can buy acetone and a chemical sprayer and give it a squirt of acetone. That does the same thing. It breaks the surface tension and the bubbles are released. I tend to not use that because you don't want to dilute too much of the epoxy. Acetone will evaporate rather, and work its way back out, but heat here, you don't really do anything other than, I mean, you don't change the structure of the matrix chemically. So that works for me, but whatever works for you again. Methodically, don't rush it. And it's well rewarded. All right, We are done with that. Now comes the difficult part. This is, I just can't tell you that how difficult this is to be laid out correctly. If you lift the material, get it over to where it needs to start, ish, and then you roll it to the best you can. It is very, very difficult to get started correctly. I mean, it's dang near impossible. And you just might need to lift it a little bit again, bring it over. The good thing is, once you have done that, sorry I'm in your way for the camera. Then it is relatively easy and carefully to just roll it up. I de-wet the brush, and then I use a non-saturated brush to kind of help me spread it. If there are cosmetic issues that you can see, just try to put it back to the best of your ability. Keep rolling. Once you get it started, it's actually fairly easy. The reason you use a non-saturated brush here is if you put resin on the brush now, it'll start to drag and it can tend to capture and grab the fiber. When there is something where it didn't saturate correct, just use your finger and kind of dab it back down where it needs to be. The fibers tend to relax back into a state where they've been woven. That way you can kind of avoid having any terrible looking areas. So here is 69 inches. Then it is a matter of saturating the fabric. Again, I prefer pushing the resin that is underneath up through the fiber with a non-saturated brush. Looks like we're a little short over here. We'll fix that. But I think I'd say that is down. And we are good. So if you do this carefully in an up and down motion rather than back and forth motion, you are forcing the resin up through the fiber, and then you saturate again and continue with layers and layers and layers. If you start doing a lot of this, all you're doing is pulling the fibers before they have a chance to dig in the resin. And that will just cause as cosmetic thing more than anything else. And you can see when you have it saturated, it's a tedious work. Nobody has ever said it was not. That's why carbon is expensive. Well, composites is a tedious work. You're trying to wrap a wet napkin around something and then make it stay. This may seem to the camera that it's a little short on resin, but it is really not. It is just a matter of to try to observe the 1:3 ratio. This is something that you need to do. If you all of a sudden have too much resin in it, like I mentioned before, it's just like you build a layered cake and all of a sudden you have too much frosting in between the layers, and the frosting is the bonding agent in this matrix. It's what glues the fibers together. But just like in a cake, if you have too much frosting in there, all that happens is just it becomes a wet mess that slides back and forth. So it worked really well. Half the size done over here. It is always good to work where you can see the glare of the composite. That way you know exactly where you need to pay more attention and where you've already been, so you can pay less attention. Just different technique again. Most important thing is don't worry, not gonna blow up. When you see like a little imperfection, just use your fingers and just dab it in like that. It's inevitable you will trap some fiber or something on the inside or outside, and it's just the way it goes when you do it like this, which is why that, you know, vacuum bagging is always a sure method. Even if you vacuum bags pre-pregnated carbon fiber, which is just carbon that's been pre-saturated with resin and then cooled down, or if you're using a resin transfer method, any of those methods are really good. Pre-pregnated material is difficult to work with because it has to be stored at a cold temperature, because if you don't, it starts to cure and set. And it has to be baked post-cure. So there are certainly advantages. Resin transfer is simply where you put the whole thing in a sock or in a bag, and then you suck from one side of the layup, and then you have a snout where you introduced resin to another part of the bag. And then you just literally suck the resin from one side to the other. And since the whole thing is under vacuum, you're okay. It's distributing itself as it should, and your weight ratios are absurd. So, works really nice. So here's layer one. I deliberately filmed the whole thing so you can see it in its entirety. I will then pause the camera, and we'll lay down layers 2 and 3. Until then. So I just laid down the second layer after a layer of resin, and then again I'm just going to massage the resin up through with the brush. You can also, if you want to, use a scraper. There's nothing wrong in that. The scraper, however, soft plastic or rubber scraper, it really does tend to disturb the material more than I care for, so I just do it the old-fashioned way. I love brushes. However, again, it is tedious, but it works. It will appear to you that there is not enough resin in there, and again, that is normal when you're trying to observe the 1 to 3. Optimal temperatures are all, of course, like I said earlier, 90 degrees. If you must work with it at 70, you can. It'll be fine. It just takes a little bit longer, and it's a little bit more temperamental because the resin is now thicker, more like a molasses. The good thing about it is the fabric does not tend to move around as much. So that's the good thing. So pros and cons to everything. So now this is the second. Just wanted you to see that. And then we'll go onwards to the third. Careful when you plant it, because once you put it down, it is not going to move. Very much. This panel was cut, so that's why it is short. there's not many things flying here today. For sugar. If you didn't cut the plates, obviously you would not need to do this. But in order for me to get these home, I had to cut them. So I'll just bond them back together. So this will obviously be a step that you would not need to make. One panel down and one to go. This is the Thixotropic that we're going to use to bond the panels together once I'm done making them. And I will talk more about that here in a little bit, but right now it is just to bond this together. All right, more layers of carbon. Last layer, about to be laid down. That was better. Oh yes. And here's the last layer. Now it's just a matter of get that saturated. Just like before. You can go ahead and turn it off, Bryce, if you don't mind. So here it is. Looks bad because there's some air trapped in, but a thin sheet of plastic lay down on the top, and you can massage it, do whatever that you want. And instead of treating the top layer with release agent, now we can just lay the top layer down. That's going to squish everything down. And if you didn't want that, that's fine too. If you want a nice texture inside, you just treat the top layer with release agent, but it's not going to bother me being inside the camper like that. So then we will put a top down. You got enough leverage? Mm-hmm. Are you good? Mm-hmm. You can let it go if you want. We shoot all Dan's on top of it. Just settle any pocket. The nice thing here with this like that, too, using plastic, if you had treated this with the release agent, once it's down, and it would not move. It's just going to slowly sit here and add the pressure to it. So then we cure it. Good? Yeah. There it is. There it is. So here's the big reveal. First you peel this off the top. All cured. As you can see, the release of it is not an issue at all. Just peels right off. And here's where you can see that the layer is just not as pretty. But nor does it really matter. It's really okay. I don't mind that at all. It's a whole lot less work. So anyway, the next step is to get it off the bottom. Then it becomes a methodical peeling off. This cannot be, well, I simply can't explain how important it is that this cannot be rushed. You see how, oh, the release is really nice. Sounds terrible though, doesn't it? And there it is. That's really cool. Anytime you break a mold, it can't be a little scared. So I'm going to don a pair of gloves. When you saturate these fibers, each of these fibers with epoxy, it becomes a hypodermic needle. So it's always good to wear gloves when you do this. And here is the pretty side. Now, I say pretty because what's still attached is the release agent. You can wash that off with water, scrape it, peel it off, whatever you want. But bottom line Here is one beautiful panel. Extremely lightweight and stiff. Really, really neat. And then it just becomes a matter of this just, I usually just wash it off with water. See if we can get a little closer. Take a look here. So you can see the bubbles here. Looks like it's in, but here is how you can see just peels off like that. This is how thin of a film this is. And then you just peel away. And you have a super nice finish. It's like a little bit of a satin, but really nice. I really, really like this finish. You know, you can make high gloss composite pieces, but yeah, you know, not on a overland trailer. But yeah, really, really, really happy with that. Just peel away. More to go. So there you have it. One composite panel. Woohoo!